All right, guys, welcome back to our coronavirus quarantine journal. We're stuck inside for the foreseeable future, and so we thought it would be very interesting to kind of document our thoughts during this entire event, because anytime there's an historic event like this, we always wish we could go back into the past and kind of see what it was like back then, see what people were thinking. Well, we are two average people, and we've just been up on the news and the stock market and everything. Before we get started,
one thing I got to say is, as you can see, it's not nighttime. So we're actually doing this before the end of the day.
we are.
And a lot can happen after the markets close and the nightly news kind of begins.
Absolutely. Let's start off by talking about the numbers currently. Today is March 19th. It is 5 p.m. and coronavirus cases are 242,000 and deaths are 9,995. So while we're filming this, we will go over 10,000 deaths.
What was that number again? To what total?
242,000 and deaths are 9,995. I have been watching Italy's death numbers for the last week because everyone says we've kind of reacted this similarly to Italy, and so we should expect similar numbers. And for the last 3 or 4 days, Italy has been hovering around 350 deaths per day, which made me feel good because it seems to have, like, it went up so fast and then it seems to stabilize. But then yesterday, I believe we had, I can tell you for certain, 427 deaths yesterday. So a very significant uptick in deaths overnight. I was hoping that wouldn't happen, but it happened, and it happened pretty quickly. And then at the same time, 5,300 new cases in Italy alone today, and Italy has now surpassed China in terms of death. Italy total has only 41,000 cases. China has 80,000 cases. But Italy has somehow more than double the mortality rate. So Italy currently has 3,405 deaths. China has 3,245 deaths.
Have you done that math? Every now and then I will divide the numbers, and I know one of the big problems we're all facing is, are any of the numbers accurate?
Right.
But I'll always divide the numbers to see what the rates are, and it's like China, Italy, Iran, maybe even Spain now. Like, some of them are in the 6% death rate
right.
to 3%. Like, it's very high.
Yeah,
and then you
high.
do the other numbers, like, what the heck is going on with Singapore and Cambodia and a lot of these countries where they have 0 deaths? It's like that. I mean, you see things about Singapore, and they seem to be doing well.
People always bring it up as, they always say, if we just do more testing, or if we had caught this earlier, we could be like Singapore. And I always ask, okay, what is Singapore doing? Well, they did lots of tests. Then what? I don't understand. It's like they have, the test itself is the antidote. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, because you would think that, like, at the period of time before we knew even coronavirus existed, people were catching it and then dying, especially if you were close to China, you know?
Sure.
And so I just wonder, like, shouldn't they have at least 10 deaths from people who got it before they even knew what was going on? How could they literally have 0 deaths?
Is that true? They have 0 deaths?
I believe so. A lot of countries have 0 deaths.
Well, of course. The majority of countries currently have 0 deaths. It's still relatively early.
There is this YouTube live stream that's been going on since, like, beginning of February, I think, that I watch a lot. I just leave it up on the screen. I'll put a link to that in the video here. But it just shows every country at all times, you know, and you can just see, and it's constantly updating everything. It shows a lot of graphs that are really unique, where some of the other analytic websites I was looking at, they just kind of told you the number of cases and the deaths, and that was it, you know.
So South Korea has 91 deaths.
South Korea was kind of up there. We just surpassed them in terms of deaths, but Singapore has 0, I believe.
Oh, Singapore. Sorry.
Singapore. No, not South Korea. South Korea was one of the first kind of red flags.
You're right. So Singapore currently has 345 cases and 0 deaths. Now, I just read someone online today saying that Singapore may soon do a lockdown.
They're not doing that? How? I don't.
I don't know.
All this
I don't
time
understand
inside,
it.
I haven't spent enough time reading about what Singapore is actually doing.
Yeah, I don't fully know, and it seems like there's still a bit of a divide in the world, in the country, online, as to how serious this is. In our last video, I think we had a very serious tone. I was expecting more people to say that we were overreacting, but many people were angry that I brought up at the beginning of the video that the flu on average kills 650,000 people per year, and they were like, you have to stop comparing it to the flu. And I'm like, I feel like it's very fair to compare similar death rates to similar
One thing
viruses.
I've been going down a rabbit hole with is the idea of vaccinations. And I was talking to my dad, and we get in these arguments on the phone. It's something like 30 to 50% of Americans get flu vaccinations.
Yep.
So if you removed that out of both the numbers of deaths from the flu and also the kind of herd, what do you call it, the herd immunity, you would think that the flu could be at least 2 or 3 times as bad as it already is if we didn't have a vaccine for it, right?
I would imagine.
So I think in some ways it is kind of comparable.
I mean, we don't know yet. I mean, certainly if Italy is having a 6% mortality rate, like that's horrific.
It's a lot
yeah,
more.
the flu is
My
like
only
0.1%.
point is that with the flu, we are able to kind of predict every year where it's going to mutate, build a vaccine around that, and then a lot of Americans actually do get it. I mean, I used to get it a lot. If like I'd go into CVS and they said, get your free flu shot, or maybe it was like $10, I would do it if I like saw it, but I don't think I've had one in the last like 6 or 7 years. But 50% of Americans typically get that flu shot, and you have to think that is protecting a lot of people.
So Trump has gone live once again. He's saying they are working on a vaccine, and he has cut all of the red tape, and he's working with the FDA? Whoever's in charge of the drugs, and they are pushing this vaccine through faster than any drug in human history. And someone pointed out yesterday, you guys can do your own research and figure this out, but some guy who invented some vaccine has come out and said, there's no way in hell I would take that vaccine.
Yeah.
But he's not an anti-vaxxer. There's lots of anti-vaxxer people. We have a lot of anti-vaxxing people here in this neighborhood, and friends that we know of that are against all vaccines. That seems to be fairly trendy right now. But the guy who made a vaccine is like, there's no way I'm taking something that has that little test.
Vaccines are held to the highest standard. Before you can start inoculating your whole population or the world with a vaccine that could potentially have catastrophic implications down the road, it has to go through at least a 12-month period of testing it on different stages of people, Mm-hmm. And so the idea that a vaccine in a horrific time like this is going to be expedited, I think is a fallacy. I don't think that's true. I don't think we would do it. I don't think we should do it. But that's not to say, I know Trump announced there was a lot of other drugs, malaria drugs and antiviral drugs, that are already approved by the FDA and the CDC and everything for use for other things, but they might be helpful in this case.
Yeah.
I don't know where the line is drawn where you say this is approved for this purpose. It's kind of like I'm on Humira. Humira is approved for all of these conditions, but to then add another condition that's not been tested, I don't know if that can move faster or slower, or if it helps that it's FDA approved already, but not for this. You know what I mean?
A drug called chloroquine, and some people would add to it hydroxychloroquine. Now, this is a common malaria drug. It's also a drug used for strong arthritis. Somebody has pretty serious arthritis. But the nice part is it's been around for a long time. So we know that if things don't go as planned, it's not going to kill anybody. When you go with a brand new drug, you don't know that that's going to happen. You have to see, and you have to go long test. But this has been used in different forms, very powerful drug in different forms. And it's shown very encouraging, very, very encouraging early results. And we're going to be able to make that drug available almost immediately. And that's where the FDA has been so great. They've gone through the approval process. It's been approved.
Well, they were talking about in the press conference, and I forget the exact name for this, but the idea is that if you're going to die anyway,
Yes.
and you want to be
A test,
a
like a
test
guinea
rat,
pig,
like
yeah.
you might as well try anything. And so not only are they allowing more of that, but they're doing it in this more official way where it allows them to track what happens. Whereas before, if somebody was on their deathbed, the doctor might be allowed to give them medication that isn't approved for certain things, but then he's not relaying that information back to any central hub.
You have like a privacy act or something. It's like HIPAA or some organization that says you can't share patient. It's like patient-doctor confidentiality. Well, Kristen just posted a video on her Facebook that is from NBC, and it is dealing with the spring break culture in America right now.
Yeah.
And, I feel like I've seen all these crazy videos, and I'm like, okay, well, what did you find? And this video I just saw this like 2 hours ago. It might have instilled fear in me more than anything I have seen.
Really?
There are beaches all over Florida with like spring break that I remember, like MTV spring break, like Daytona
it did
spring
look like
break.
that, yeah.
And it is crowds of people, and I know how the media is. It's like you can get anyone to say anything. But some of the quotes they're saying in this video are insane.
If I get corona, I get corona. At the end of the day, I'm not going to let it stop me from partying.
It's good to take precautions, granted, but it's spring break. Everyone's going to be at the beach regardless.
It's an epidemic, but living in fear is no way to live.
What's my reaction? What's spring break without a beach?
The coronavirus task force says it's up to your generation.
I mean, if it's up to us, then let us handle it how we want to.
Well, it's just these young people like, listen, it's not going to affect me. I'm young, I'm healthy, it's fine. I'm not going to stop partying for this
Right.
disease,
Here's my
So,
worry, though,
yeah.
is America hasn't gone under quarantine yet, and there's like people are speculating that we're going to lock down in our entire country on Monday. And there's other people that are saying that's going to involve forces, martial law or the Coast Guard or the National Guard. Organizations are going to have to come to your city and say, you need to get in your house or you're going to be fined, arrested, or potentially shot, which the fining and the arresting is already happening here in Puerto Rico, right?
Right.
And so my worry is that all these people are going out to spring break and potentially contracting this virus, and then we're going to quarantine everybody, and those kids
back in their home.
they're not going to go back to college. They're going to go back to their homes.
Yeah.
And it is like the perfect storm. We talked, I think, yesterday about, people in New York or areas where they're doing a lockdown and then everyone escapes. That's what they're saying
Right
happened
before
in
the lockdown.
Wuhan. Everyone said we're going to lock down Wuhan, and a lot of people escaped because they didn't want to be in lockdown. And that might be potentially the worst thing we could do. And, the more I read about the culture in America and like how unhealthy we are, like everyone's obese, everyone's like older people are like geriatrics, and like there's just so many of the underlying health problems that are associated with this disease that this virus can manipulate, and take advantage of. America is probably the worst when it comes to that.
Maybe.
And so I kind of feel in my gut that this next like 7 to 10 days is going to be the worst time for America for this virus. This is when, if reality hit for some of us when the NBA shut down and flights from Europe shut down overnight with that press conference, I think this next week is going to be when the numbers start to get crazy, and the tests, they're saying the test numbers are going to start to be released now that we're testing more people. I think this is going to be a big week. This is when people are going to say, how serious is this? There's going to be a huge amount of fear that's introduced. But maybe there's a silver lining. Maybe some of the numbers that we get back actually show that it's not as bad, or that the mortality rate is more at 1% instead of 6%. I don't know yet, but I see these videos with these spring breakers, and I'm like, this is crazy.
Florida's governor refusing to close beaches, instead repeating CDC guidelines. Avoid groups larger than 10. Beachfront establishments also open.
If we delay this, how many of us will get sick?
But the closure not in effect until next Monday.
But here's what I thought when I saw the video with the spring breakers. I saw the exact same video. I just thought to myself, this is still way less bad than Disney World. It's way fewer people than Universal Studios remaining open, and they are closed now.
Yeah.
but they were open for a long time.
Yeah.
And everybody's going on the same rides and grabbing the same handles and putting their hands on the same bars.
Maybe.
If you're out on the beach, what are you doing out on
But
the
it's
beach?
spring break, man. You and I know what happens at spring break. You're doing the keg stands, you're sharing the beers, you're hooking up with everybody. Like,
that's
there's
what you
a lot.
dream spring break is.
That's what
and
my spring break was like.
it
No,
was
you
not.
weren't doing all those things?
No.
Knocking
I
tooth
didn't
out
do-
doing a keg stand?
No, I didn't do any of that. Like, I wanted to. That was the dream because I saw it on MTV, and then it's just like me and my nerd buddies.
Well, I think a lot of people, a large percentage of people that go to those locations for spring break, they're sharing a lot of bodily fluids and they're in tight groups. So.
Maybe. I don't know. I'm kind of. I hope that we get more information over the next coming months and years as to why it took hold so well in some countries and not others. Why is Italy being hit so hard? Is it because they greet each other with a kiss? I mean, we do that here in Puerto Rico. Is it
the leather trade? Like, we heard that, Italy is known for genuine Italian leather.
Okay.
And a lot of that leather comes from China. And apparently that trade path is really, really strong.
Oh, okay.
And somebody was saying, like, I asked that same question. I was like, why is Northern Italy, of all places, like, shouldn't Spain and France and the UK being hit as much as Italy, like, or Greece that's right there? And some of it could be the reporting, but it could also just be, like, trade, and we don't understand, but maybe a lot of textiles and stuff go to Italy from China, and that was just hit harder, Maybe the population's older, and it's being hit harder because of that. I don't really know, but it is a good question. All right, so one thing that I kind of want to throw out there is how divided people seem to be on where the direction of this virus is going to go.
Yeah.
There are people that say it's just the flu, it's not a big deal, and we're going to get over this and realize, oh my gosh, we destroyed our whole world economy because it's the flu. And then there's other people that are saying this could be the end of the world and millions of people are going to die in America alone, many more over the world, right? This tweet by Jeremy Young went incredibly viral yesterday.
I did not see this.
This was shared by a lot of our photography friends. We're all in group chats. And this was from the Imperial College report. You didn't read any of this?
I don't think so.
So he basically summarizes all of this research paper. And basically, maybe I could just read some of this. He says 80% Americans would get the disease. 0.9 of them will die. Between 4 and 8% of all Americans over the age of 70 would die. 2.2 million Americans will die from the virus itself. It gets worse. People put on ventilators, 50% on ventilators still die because our healthcare collapses and everything like that. So the actual death toll from the virus would be closer to 4 million Americans in a span of 3 months. He says how many people is 4 million? It's more Americans than have died from anything ever. It's the population of Los Angeles. It's 4 times the number of the Americans who died in the Civil War on both sides combined. And it's 2/3 as many people that died in the Holocaust. I think the Holocaust being Jews that were killed, not like every single person, but when you think of the Holocaust, that's what you think of.
Yeah.
And then he says, he goes on, and he says, that's if we do nothing. Now, if we flatten the curve, it's like it just lowers the numbers a little bit. If he's saying it's 4 million Americans die, let me see if I can pull this up here. It turns into 2 million. If we just flatten the curve, it halves it, but it goes from 4 million to 2 million. And then finally, there's a suppression. And suppression is this idea that we completely isolate everybody and shut down the entire world, no work done for like 30 or 40 days, and we try to do the most aggressive. It's not just isolation now and lowering the curve. It's like completely suppressing it. And the good news is, he says, suppression works. The death rate in America will peak in 3 weeks from now with a few thousand deaths as it goes down. But, he says here, if we ever relax the suppression before the vaccine is administered to the entire population, COVID-19 comes right back and kills millions of people all over again. Meanwhile, the world's burning financially because everyone is locked in their home. So this tweet went wildly crazy on Twitter, and I don't know Jeremy Young's background, but he's quoting a research paper, right? And this research paper is very, very dire.
Okay.
Now compare that to an article, and I'll put all of these links in the description below, but there was an article that a doctor here in Puerto Rico sent us, and I'm not going to pull it up right now, but basically the idea was that all of these models are based on numbers that are so wildly inaccurate that there is absolutely no way to predict anything one way or another. And one of the cases that it brought up was the Princess cruise line that was quarantined, I think, twice. It was like quarantined for 14 days, and then they decided, what are we going to do with these people? And I believe many Americans then got quarantined again before they let them into America. And the problem with this one is there's only 700 people on the boat, right? So it's a very small sample size. But as of right now, only 7 people have died. And the majority of the people on this boat are very old, elderly people.
Okay.
So they're in the highest risk group for dying.
Yep.
And they're in an isolated boat, so there's no outside influence. They couldn't get off the boat. And 7 out of 700 people died.
Okay.
What is the math there? It's less.
1%.
It's like 1%.
Right.
So worst case scenario, with the oldest population trapped on a boat for weeks, with people that have been confirmed to have the virus, only 1% of people in that small sample size actually died.
Okay.
So these ideas that we could be up to 4% or 5% that we are seeing with numbers in Italy, it just may not be an accurate representation because we may have way more cases that we don't even count, or we may have overcounted the deaths of some sort, you know. The argument could be we're undercounting the deaths, but
I'm sure we're undercounting the deaths a little bit.
this argument was just saying if this could be even 1% death, which I think this article argues it could be like 0.5% mortality rate, if you looked at the numbers from this cruise line.
Yeah.
And you assume that what if you added 700 extra people to that cruise that were all in a lower age bracket?
Then
It could half
no
it.
one would die.
Yeah, it would half it really easily. And the whole argument was, are we willing as a society, as a world, to completely collapse our entire world economy and potentially drop us into a Great Depression simply because we're fearful that this virus is way more lethal than we really even know that it could be, you know, without the right data. And that's why testing is so important. But I don't know, it's just two ends of the spectrum. One of them is quoting all these stats and saying 4 million Americans are going to die, or at least 2 million, which is still a horrific number to think about. Or it could be just a few times more deadly than the flu.
Yeah, it's very frustrating because we will know, like the history books will say, if this was the biggest overreaction in the history of the world, or we didn't do enough and it was the biggest tragedy because we were too lazy, you know, and we should have done more.
And the thing is, if you take the negative side of this, that it's going to be horrific no matter what, and if we quarantine everybody and we suppress it, we're just going to live this life of cycles. We open up everything, everyone gets reinfected again, we quarantine. And we do this multiple times. You're looking at like a pulse.
Yeah.
It's going to get bad and then quarantine and then bad. And this can go on, the suppression method, it's like it goes on for years. It goes on for 12 to 18 months. And you're never really solving the problem until you can come up with a vaccination.
Right.
And so the idea that the world and people can mentally go through that is as horrifying as 1% of the population of the world dying. I mean, they're equal evils and like horrors, you know?
Yeah, you know, it's you're having to choose between two horrific answers. Talking about, you know, how we think the United States are going to change, and there's lockdowns and maybe martial law and everything. The governor of New York, Cuomo, is that his name?
Is this Andrew? I always get the guy on CNN mixed up with.
Whatever. He just came out today. And I felt like he had a pretty good speech about, he was very serious and said, you know, people are going to die, but the panic could be worse than the disease itself, and we have to keep calm. And then he tells this story about how his friend was really nervous that, you know, martial law was coming and he was going to be trapped in his house. And Cuomo was like, there's no way. I'm the one who makes that call, and I'm not going to make that call.
Yeah.
And he's like, it took me 30 minutes to convince this guy that the buck stops with me, and I'm telling you right now, I'm not doing that.
I had a conversation last night with a business person from New York City who I know, who was panicked that New York City was going to be locked down, that there were going to be roadblocks, that there were going to be mandatory quarantine. He was going to be imprisoned in his house. And I said, you know, where did you hear that? Well, that's what they say. That's what I'm hearing. They're saying. And I was saying, look, I would know, right? Because I would have to authorize those actions legally. It's not going to happen. Well, I hear it is going to happen. I said, but I know, but I would have to do it. And I'm telling you, I'm not doing it. It must have taken me 25 minutes just to slow him down to hear the information. When you get that emotional, that fearful, you literally don't process information the same way. So we have to be very aware of that. Clear communication from everyone.
When I was watching this live, it just really struck me, and I thought, wow, if it does come, if the federal government somehow mandates it, or he decides it needs to happen, what's he going to say then,
Yeah, but politicians and, sports players, they always renege on what they said. I'm never doing that, and then next thing you know, Tom Brady's not playing for the Patriots anymore. So,
did that happen yesterday?
I think it, yeah.
Or did he retire? I'm not a football fan.
Dude, that news is so far down right now. Like, it's like the Apple product being announced. Like, I don't know, but I saw him trending, and apparently he will not play for the Patriots.
But does that mean he's playing for someone else, or he's retiring?
I think he's just a free agent. Like, I think he didn't extend his contract, or Boston didn't extend his contract. I don't know what it was, but it was he's been released.
Let's talk a little bit about testing. Over the last few days, we've heard from big name doctors here in our neighborhood that many of the tests are not accurate, and that they were only accurate 60% of the time. I don't know if this is the case still. I saw one of my buddies on Facebook recorded himself getting a test.
Yeah.
And it looks pretty bad. Have you seen the test?
Where they go up the nose?
Yeah, like in the nose, down the back of the throat, and then have to waggle it around for 10 seconds. Well, it's
Did you hear Trump's response to this? He's like, I had the test. It was a test, and it wasn't the greatest thing, but it wasn't bad. And I just think if he had that done, like, you would think he would have said, oh my gosh, the test is horrible, but I did it.
I don't know. I've heard him say things like, we need to come up with a better test because it's very uncomfortable. You can tell he's trying to play it down a little. I mean, it's not that bad. It's not like they're having to slice your arm open or something. Right. It's just putting a thing in your nose, but it's going deep. But anyway, we have recently heard from one of these doctors in our neighborhood that he has access to a new form of blood test.
I have it right here. So this is the rapid finger stick at-home IgG/IgM coronavirus test.
Okay.
He says it's about $40. Apparently we can get it down to $20 if enough people order it.
And keep in mind, 4 days ago they told us the test costs $3,000 per test.
That may be the one that goes up your nose, and I've heard a lot about testing too from other sources, but this one is the first kind of test where I think you prick your hand and it draws blood, kind of like if you had like an insulin pen or something.
Yep.
And it will give you a result, within waiting time. I don't know if that's like 5 minutes or an hour.
You said it was similar to a pregnancy test.
And so we still don't know if it's telling you that you have the virus right now and it's active, or if you've had the antibodies or antigens in your blood, but you could have had it in a previous time.
You said you...
I don't know that we know that answer yet.
Oh, we don't know yet.
We don't know that answer. And doctors are still saying, we don't know even if you may have gotten over the virus, are you still able to spread it? Like, that's one of the biggest questions people have, is are you still able to spread the virus after you've already recovered weeks later? But I think we have hundreds of these coming to Puerto Rico. I know I'm ordering like 10. I'm going to send them to a bunch of family and friends, and we're all going to do it here, Yeah. I don't know what it's going to say if we all come up positive, but we've been quarantined for 14 days with no symptoms. You know what I mean?
That would be great. Then we went through it and it wasn't bad.
Well, here's the question I proposed, is if it's not able to be passed because we're already over it and maybe we got it a month ago and didn't even know, and we have the antibodies for it and we're not sick anymore, we have a natural vaccine, so to speak, are we able to go book these cheap flights and go book amazing properties that are empty right now? I mean, should we have the best life ever?
Are we safe at this point?
Because I feel like, once you're over the hump, it's
well,
let's go to New Zealand and let's rent the tree houses and let's go to, the Maldives. Let's go everywhere.
Yeah.
Give them their business. I think that would be good. And if we knew that we couldn't infect anybody, it's I would almost rather get the flu early.
Yeah, I agree.
Rather than being quarantined for a year and never, just always wondering, when's it coming? When am I going to get it?
Right. Well, there is a theory going around, and I think we touched on this yesterday. And keep in mind, guys, do not take anything we are saying in this video as fact at all. Double check everything we're saying. A lot of this stuff is rumors. You see, I'm coughing right now.
Dude, you don't know about the chicken wing?
No,
this
sorry.
is like week 2.
Sorry.
Well, you don't have to do it again just to prove that you know how to do it.
Well, no, it's a little itchy. There's been this rumor that there's 2 strains. One was pretty easygoing, and then the second one is the one that's killing people. And we have this nurse here who works for a hospital in the States, and she's in daily communication, and they are now afraid there is a 3rd strain.
Yeah.
So just because you had it and recovered from it, I don't know that anyone's figured out yet if you're safe.
Yes, because I mean, again, you're hearing things. It's like I'm hearing that some of the nurses in China that treated people that got it themselves and got over it are now falling sick a second time.
Yeah.
You know? Now, am I able to talk about conspiracy theories on this?
Just say they're a conspiracy theory.
This one, so my background, just to be completely honest, I graduated with a biology degree, and my senior research project was, like medical mechanisms for drug design. My organic chemistry teacher worked at like one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in Birmingham, Alabama, and he was constantly testing and doing molecular biology, organic biology for organic chemistry for these drug companies. And so I can read a research paper and hear enough to where a lot of it's over my head at this point. It's been like 15 years since I was doing all of that, but I can at least understand the basics, right? Well, there is this video that just got shared by one of our viewers on the last video, and it's by Dr. Paul Cottrell, and it's called Prepare Now for 18 Months. And he is got a lot of titles, but he's, I believe, a molecular or a organic chemist. I don't know. Look it up. I clearly don't know. But he works at Harvard, very intelligent guy, and he goes through the outline of the actual code of this virus that was published in February, late February, by some researchers in India. And to be completely honest, the Indian paper has now been retracted and pulled. There's a whole reason that people think why that happened. But he said, I pulled the code off of, this NIH research paper, and I started doing my own research on it just because, that's his field and he enjoyed it. And he believes, without a doubt, that there are certain snippets within the genetic code of this virus that are they're common in other viruses that we know, including AIDS and including SARS. Now, this virus is SARS. The real name of it is like SARS-CoV-2.
Okay.
COVID-19 is like, I guess, the condition that you get if you catch this virus, but it's actually a SARS virus, right? It's a coronavirus SARS virus. And, he's just playing this game of like, there are research facilities around the world, especially when SARS came out, when was that, like 10 years ago? That, their job is to do the research on the DNA and everything and to try to figure out how to prevent this from happening again. And with good intentions, they splice these genes and they do a lot of manipulation in the labs. And in this case, they tried to figure out how to make something that, I don't know that they made anything, I don't exactly know why they made it, but they're just making things to try to figure out how it works in general, And the theory, and this isn't a new theory, this has been going around for like at least a month or two, is that this was accidentally leaked out of Wuhan, out of the laboratory there. I'm not going to go as far as saying it's weaponized or that they did it with malicious intent, but something happened to where this virus now got into the public, and it didn't necessarily just start in a fish, wet market. And this virus is easily able to replicate like AIDS. It's not AIDS, but it has that mechanism in it. And it is deadly like SARS is. And so you've taken like elements out of different viruses that have made them way more potent in that this is actually like a bioengineered virus. Okay. Now that is a huge, huge speculation, right?
Of course.
This would be the most awful form of biological weapon warfare, intentional or not, that's ever happened in the world's history.
Yep.
But there's a lot of people, very smart people that I know, a lot of people that you know, that are really into this theory. And when you hear this guy speak with such authority on the peptides and the amino acids and how it's attaching to the proteins, like he's talking from a molecular biologist perspective, It's pretty horrifying.
But the thing is if you see the sequence and you see it for the spike protein that makes it more virulent, and there's 4, the chances of that being zoonotic is low, because it's 1 sequence I could say maybe zoonotic, 2 sequences maybe, 3, 4, then the probability becomes less and less, right? And these sequences are not just 2 amino acids matching. One is 6, another is like 8, so that the chances, and to make an amino acid, you need 3 nucleotides. So, and you need 3 nucleotides plus another 3 nucleotides plus another 3 nucleotides to make up the 6 amino acid sequence. So the chances of it being zoonotic is very low. On top of when you look at the copy pasting that took place with bat SARS-like and SARS coronavirus. So this was definitely bioengineered. And that's just looking at it from bioinformatics. So you can look at it from 3 different ways. You can look at it from the bioinformatics. You can look at it from the probabilities, pure probability. It's very low. And then on top of it, it's right by a P4 facility where supposedly it was leaked, by the fish market. So the probability of all this being zoonotic is like 0.00001 or less. The bioinformatic perspective, you can see the copy pasting. But then you can see the building through the research and how they were studying this in the bat host and try to make a virus that goes under the radar of the immune system to be able to understand the biology, to speed up the research. So I understand why they did it.
And he gets into this whole theory that, as the virus goes from LA and Chicago and Wuhan and Singapore and all over the world, viruses naturally mutate on their own. And so there are about 30 or 40 different strains of virus that we can monitor because little tiny parts of the genetic code have changed through mutation. But they're not, they're not different strains in the sense that if we came up with a vaccination, that vaccination probably would kill all 30 strains, right? But there's also this idea that what you're talking about, another strain has broken off of this lineage of 30, and this is the one that's significantly different. Right now, the main strain is acting on a receptor called ACE2, and ACE2 is found in your lungs, it's found in they're saying it could be found in your heart, it's found in your intestines and your liver, and at the moment, coronavirus is attacking the lungs, and people are getting pneumonia, and that's primarily how they're dying. But the fear with this other strain that is they're starting to theorize has broken off, and there's actually a second one out in the world. It could be attacking a completely different receptor. And the reason that is scary is because once everyone's immune or over the ACE2 version, from my understanding of this concept, the second strain could come in, and it might attack something completely different that you don't have antibodies for, and now you catch the second wave. And this guy's theorizing this I think this video was released a day or 2 ago. And so this idea is a lot to digest, and there's different layers of it. Some of them are harder to understand or believe than others, but the way the virus works in general and the way he's describing it seems like that is actually what's happening. And they talk about the Spanish flu. They talk about all these things that have happened in history, and over again, there's waves. The Spanish flu didn't kill everybody in 3 months and then disappear off the planet. It came in waves, and then the second wave came in the fall, and it was worse than the first wave. And we know from history that these things happen, as an oscillating curve, it comes and goes. And so, I don't know, just reading this, and the title is very, clickbaity, prepare for 18 months. But I think there could be some truth in some of this stuff. I'm not saying that China released this as a biological weapon. I don't even know, I don't have the authority to say that this is truly spliced with all the genes. I'm going to leave it up to the experts to say, but I know you said yesterday, and you've been saying for weeks, that maybe our government knows something else that we don't know, and that's why all the media is taking this much more seriously when you perhaps think, oh, it's just a little stronger flu. Maybe if some of this stuff is true, this is why everyone around the world is taking this as seriously as they are. That's a lot to digest. I even feel a little guilty for saying it, but watch the video. It's an hour long, And a lot of it was over my head, and I kind of have a background in that, but it's scary stuff.
Well, I have no background in that, so.
Well, watch the video tonight. It's
Okay.
pretty horrifying, but that's, and it's not a new theory. Like a lot of people, my dad was telling me 3 months ago, before this was really a big thing, he was like, there's a biological research center right outside of Wuhan. And I'm like, come on, Dad. But now, I'm starting to hear more of it.
Yeah?
And it's different when you hear from somebody who knows what they're talking about, that has the credentials, versus somebody like me who you're like, okay, you took 16 courses in biology.
Used to work at Ritz Camera.
Yeah, I used to work at Ritz Camera because I couldn't get into dental school.
Let's talk a little bit about the stock market. And in the last video, we didn't really talk about our psychology, but one reason why I want to make these videos is because I want to be able to watch this in 10 years from now or show my kids, like in the middle of a panic, here's what we were thinking.
Yeah.
And here's good decisions we made and here's poor decisions we made and everything. And you have sold 50% of your position in the stock market?
Yes.
I
wasn't even going to tell you because I know, like already with Amazon's like up 5% from when I sold.
Okay.
And Amazon's one of those weird stocks where I debate. Like my biggest gains were in Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, man, I had Amazon stock from like 6 years ago.
Yeah.
And so I kept thinking Amazon's one of those companies where if we're all in lockdown, they can keep shipping stuff to people and that's going to be good. But then I was also saying half of the inventory in Amazon is from China. And once like Amazon products are out of stock, maybe Amazon's going to have no products to sell and they're going to go down. Like I couldn't figure out what to do with Amazon, but I wound up selling half of my portfolio. And my thought was,
how long ago?
Like 4 days ago.
Okay.
And my thought was, let me go ahead and take some of my gains before they're gone, and then we sell a bunch of my losses and do a tax harvesting. And then also we live in Puerto Rico, and there's like a reason to buy stocks later because we live in Puerto Rico and they're not taxed the same way. So I was just thinking like this would be a good way to kind of clean up. I wish I had done all of that 2 weeks ago, but I did sell half of my positions. But now I got a good chunk of cash, and now it's waiting to get back into the market.
But I have to imagine that you're, like me, incredibly terrified to get back in the market. I keep flipping back and forth between thinking like,
yeah,
all right, now's the time.
Yeah.
We're down 25, 30% overall. Now's the time to get in. But then I started looking at previous crashes, and they took 2 years to reach bottom. And then I'm hearing people talk about world depression, and I'm like, maybe it'll take 5 years to hit bottom.
There was a video. I don't think you put this in our first podcast, but there was a video that was shared with us about all the downtrends and what happens when the market crashes to 20%, and then what happens to the market when it crashes beyond 20%, and the recovery times. Mm-hmm. I think only once in history, I think it was 2018, 2 years ago, we had that crash at Christmas from the China trade wars. I think that's the only time we had the V curve where it crashed and then it pretty much quickly rebounded. Every other time, 20% or less, it took 6 months to 2 years to recover, I believe. I'll put the graph up on the video. But every time the market changed more than 20%, it took like 3 to 5 years to recover.
Right.
And we are now sitting, what are we at right now total?
Probably 25, 30%.
25, 30%. And coronavirus has not even hit the United States yet.
Right.
Like we are at the beginning of this curve.
Right. And so something else interesting that's happened, I bought a big chunk of gold stocks, not gold, and I'm pretty ignorant to all this, so I didn't really realize that the gold stocks would do that much different than the gold. And maybe in normal scenarios it wouldn't, but because of the coronavirus, a lot of mining companies and stuff.
You have an ETF that part of that percentage is people actually going out and mining the gold out.
Right, and they
so
probably
there's a
had to
human
shut
element
down.
to it.
Yeah, so my gold stocks actually dropped farther than the S&P. So, I've been listening to Peter Schiff for the last 6 years telling me I got to be in gold because the dollar's going to collapse. And then my gold stocks crashed harder than what little I had in the S&P. Now, gold has dropped a little bit. I think what has gold dropped? Like 10% or something? But maybe the market has dropped around 30 so far.
In like a week, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so I have now doubled down.
Gold is down 10% on a month. It's down 7% in a week. So a lot's happened to gold this week.
Right. So I doubled down. I bought a ton more gold yesterday just to cover my bases.
Yeah.
but then I probably have 80% of my money in cash right now, and I am just waiting to make a big move. But people say, never, don't try to time the bottom. You just want to do, the dollar cost averaging thing and just buy every month or whatever. But
see, I haven't even looked at the end of the day market until right now.
Oh, I haven't either.
And so I will go ahead and give some of the stocks. Like, I think you're supposed to disclose that you own these and stuff.
Okay.
Like SEC rules. But I bought a lot of Moderna, which is a pharmaceutical company that they think could have the cure. I bought this like a couple weeks ago when people were freaking out about the China outbreak. It's down 10% today, but over the last week, Moderna's up 21%. So it's done pretty well. And then I also bought the Gilead Science, GILD. It's another pharmaceutical. And my thought was just, when I look at the stocks, they seem to not have hurt as much as the S&P 500 over this crazy volatility. And there could be a big upswing if some pharmaceutical company comes up with the cure for this. I also bought a lot of Clorox, thinking everyone was like going to clean their place. It hasn't been as bad. I think it's still in the red.
Yeah.
And then the other big one that was my biggest win, Zoom. Are you familiar with Zoom video services?
Only because you told me about it a few days ago.
So again, on the internet, like a month or two ago, people were like, everyone in China has gone home. They're going to start having to video conference at schools and stuff. So I bought ZM. And ZM in a week is up 13%. In a month, my fiance is a teacher. All her friends are teachers. Our main editor at Fstoppers teaches grad school. And I'm seeing now that people have started to been quarantined and school's been canceled in the United States. I'm seeing all these screenshots. I'm seeing it on CNN. All these people doing the online education, and almost every one of them, it's the Zoom player. This could be a turning point in education. I know we've always been advocates for, we should be able to teach at home. I was asking Kristen yesterday, I was like, do you think students will behave better when they're all separated and they're sitting in front of their computer and their mom and dad is like in the room? Because you see these screens and it's like two professors and then all these little kids, and they're all, there's no one to distract them, and like if you make faces, you could just like black out their video. Like, you have so much control over the classroom now, but you have other obstacles, like teaching kids on a screen is probably a whole different thing as well.
Yeah, getting them to pay attention.
Kristen hates it. She's like, I am going to really struggle not being in the classroom.
Right.
But this will be something that really changes in our society if we have to go through this for months. I mean, they're already saying the next school year is in jeopardy of even starting. Most schools are not even having graduation. University of Ohio, I think today, canceled graduation, which is what our buddy here predicted. He was saying his sales of cap and gowns are so down that he's really worried that graduation is going to be canceled. And then that was 2 weeks ago, and now it's starting to happen. So there's this like curve of how fast can you get the information and then invest in the market accordingly.
Just seems like, for the most part, if you just short anything, you will be making good money. But I don't know. I'm curious to track just overall the market. We don't need to go into details every day, but just overall, and then when we feel like we made a good decision or a bad decision. I think at this point we now are heavy in cash. We're waiting to jump back in, but we're terrified.
Are you familiar with JETS? It's an ETF with all of the airlines.
Okay.
And the idea is that you could buy this instead of trying to gamble. I mean, at this point, it feels like gambling, right?
Yeah.
Which airline are you going to put money in? Because they're at an all-time low, but maybe one of them goes bankrupt. Maybe multiple go bankrupt, but the government may not bail all of them out. Like, there's all these questions, like what's about to happen? But I know a lot of people in my investing groups are saying JETS, G-E-T-S, is like, if you want to bet on the airlines eventually getting back. That's assuming.
What is JETS down over the last month or two?
JETS is down over 3 months, 60%.
Okay. I mean, Delta's down 65% right now.
And I guess you're betting on that we're going to get over the virus and that all travel is going to go back to normal. And what I don't know as a person casually in the market is that all of this is speculation. We think airlines are going to be horrible, but we still have a quarterly report that's coming out soon. And we will know the real number of how bad they were hit. And I wonder, they always talk about stuff being priced in. When you start seeing these numbers from companies, is that going to cause the stock to dive down even more? Or is that going to be the new starting point? And people are going to say, well, that all happened in the last quarter. The virus is flattening out. We're getting over it, if that happens. now is the time for the stock to take off. People are going to start booking flights again. Everything's going to go back to normal. Or these reports going to come out and we're going to say, oh my gosh. Like the big one that's about to happen is the unemployment rate. We don't have the unemployment rate out yet. I don't know when that is. I think it's like April. So it's still got like a couple weeks.
That's going to be so wrong. Even people who technically have jobs in April are not going to have jobs in April. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
they're
but they're,
gonna think
I'm
they
hearing
have
reports
jobs.
out of Alabama, and it's like, it's shocking how many people are making claims already. My parents, all their employees made claims already. Like
unemployment claims.
Yeah, and my parents are about to do it. They had to shut down their dental practice a day or two ago. And so, you know, everyone's going to start doing this. And those will be really strong numbers. Like people are going to know how many claims and what percentage it's grown. And right now, there's numbers on the media of people saying 20% unemployment. What happens when the real number is 15 or the real number is 25? How in the world is the market going to react to that?
How can it only be 20% unemployment? It
That's
has to be like 75% unemployment, right? I mean, what are these people doing?
In a couple weeks?
Yeah. What are you going to do when you have to be inside your house for weeks or months? Nobody's paying you to do that.
Well, your wife is working out of the house, and they're doing remote work somehow.
So I think Katie's getting upset with me because, you know, obviously I'm reading all this doom and gloom, and I'm getting depressed about it. And then I'm like, Katie, what are you doing up in your tower up there? And she's like, I'm working. I have these contracts. I have to get this stuff done by this date for the contract. And I'm like, Katie, these companies are not paying you for this. You know, this is, yeah, you might have the contract, but in a month from now when the bill comes in, there's not going to be somebody in the office to pay the invoice, you know?
And she's working on big commercial jobs. She
She
does like a lot of malls and stuff?
She's working on malls. And I'm like, these malls, I just talked to my mom and she was like, all the malls in Jacksonville, Florida are now officially closed. And I'm like, just today? I figured they would have had to been closed, you know, earlier this week.
Yeah.
But just today.
Listen to this story. This will be thrown kind of in the middle here, but I got this text from my sister. So, you know, everyone in Charleston, not a worry in the world. There's like 5 cases in South Carolina. My sister said they closed, this was a couple days ago, they closed the MUSC clinic I was at last week because someone exposed 70 staff to the virus 2 weeks prior to my appointment. The person was there on February 28th. I think on the 29th is when America said we had our first death of coronavirus. So a day before the first documented death.
Okay.
February 28th, someone was there, and she was there March 11th. Apparently, he tested positive after his visit there, and MUSC, this big medical facility, just learned about it this week. They didn't take my temperature when she went in for her appointment. They just asked simple, basic questions. So then I look up, because I've been looking up all this stuff on Google, the first day that South Carolina, that Charleston says we have our first person that has the virus, was March 7th. So 8 or 9 days before they said we have our first confirmed person, they have now, a couple weeks later, said there was somebody with coronavirus in a hospital
a week before that.
A week before that infected 70 people.
Well, hold on. What do you mean by infected?
So that's up for debate. The way she wrote this was someone exposed 70 staff members to the virus.
Yeah, exposed. What does that mean? Like walked past? I mean, what type of service are you having done that 70 people are all in the room with you, you know, working on you? Like,
I mean, all it takes is like you have somebody who delivers pharmaceuticals, like a sales rep. Somebody comes in and says, hey, I got all the masks for the coronavirus break that's going to happen.
Here.
I mean, I know how the sales reps are in my dad's dental practice. Somebody comes in and he's got all the like materials that my dad needs and he's trying to sell them on the new stuff. Like there's sales reps, right, for all this stuff. He comes in and shakes hands and schmoozes and let's go out to the cafeteria and get lunch and, you know, like I can see where it happens. Now, if you're just walking past somebody, maybe 70 isn't that much. But, you know, the point is that our numbers are weeks behind where we think they are, you know.
Absolutely.
And that's my fear about this spring break situation. It's a disaster in the making, you know.
Well, I remember, you know, when Disney World was still open, those last few days, I'm a big Disney World fan. And so I was like on all the forums and stuff, and there was a huge divide. Everyone on the coronavirus forums was like, these people are insane and they're putting us all at risk and it's going to be a horrific tragedy. And then all the Disney World people were like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm not ruining my vacation, and Disney is super clean, and if I got to die, at least I die in the happiest place in the world. It was like totally split, you know?
Yeah.
Same thing in all the jiu-jitsu forums. Like a week ago, everyone was like, yeah, I'm going to class. Like, I don't care at all. No big deal. The forum that I'm a member of now, it is like 99% of people are like, are you insane? I would never train right now. It flipped that fast.
Yeah.
And so I think that is going to happen. So I had 2 conversations today. I called David, who's our employee back in the States, and he was picking on me because he's like, Lee, I've never seen you so doomsday, you know, you never act like this about anything. So I called him, and I was FaceTiming him, and he was trying to talk me down and be like, listen, man, like, we always have these crazy things happen. Every 10 years there's a crash, and, you know, maybe it'll take a year or 2 to recover, but it's going to be fine. And I'm like, David, I get it. I agree with that. I think, of course, we're going to recover. It's not like this is going to be the end of the world, but I was just like, you don't understand the panic that's about to happen in Charleston. Everybody's just going about their business for the most part. He said that traffic has died down and stuff, but you know, people are going crazy over toilet paper.
Yeah.
What happens when food supply starts to run out and the restaurants are no longer open and stuff? There's another level of panic besides toilet paper panic.
I mean, the biggest one, especially in a town like Charleston, that's like so much tourism, is what happens when all those new hotels are at 5% capacity and your 1 or 2 Airbnbs, maybe there's people that have more than that, are not booked for months.
I mean, that's happening to me right now.
It's happening really quickly, and I keep telling my parents this. I'm like, I don't even think I can totally understand how quickly the dominoes can fall, you know, but it's like, you don't make your mortgage payment, and I guess the president now is trying to delay like how long certain things are due and whatnot, and there's a period, maybe it's like 90 days before a bank will actually foreclose on your house. I was reading about the 2008 financial crisis, and they were like, there were so many foreclosures that you could live in your house for a year because they could never get through the paperwork to actually. I think your parents had a situation like that where they were trying to buy a house.
Yeah, they were trying to buy a short sale, and they had some contract, and they moved in because they sold their house, and then they lived in the house for free for a year or 2 while they waited for the bank.
It took so long for stuff to get moving.
And then finally, they just said, we're tired of waiting. We're going to buy another house. And I said, are you insane? You're living in a free house. It's an awesome house. Yeah. And they were like, no, it doesn't feel like ours.
Yeah.
So they end up leaving their free house.
Yeah.
And it eventually sold. But yeah, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I still get all the emails from the city of Charleston, and it's like they're so far behind on everything. I think they're like groups of 50 and less are okay. The president is saying groups of 10. Puerto Rico is like no groups whatsoever. A lot of the world is like no groups whatsoever. And, you know, I'm just like, Charleston's probably very common to a lot of other cities in America, you know. And you get into the Midwest and you get into the middle of the country and the South. A lot of places are like, it won't hit here that bad. Like, I don't have to worry about anything. It's like a Southern mentality or a rural mentality. Mm-hmm. I think if you're in a big city, you realize the implications. You're like, man, there's people in my elevator coughing up a lung.
Yeah.
I'm worried. But when you live in a town of 20,000 people, it doesn't feel the same way. So I'm totally with you on, like, my mind keeps flipping on this is a virus from China that's been genetically engineered and released by accident even, but like we're in trouble because this isn't like a normal, you know, natural virus. To flipping to, man, it's not that bad. When you look at these numbers, even if you do the multiplication out for a full year, it's like, okay, 1 million or 2 people die worldwide, which sounds awful, but when you think of how many billions of people in the world, like 7 or 8?
And it's close to the deaths of the flu each year.
Yeah, and so like I keep flipping one way or another, and I think the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, obviously, but no one's taking the middle route here. Like, a lot of scientists and epidemiologists are going down this crazy path, and the media is going down the crazy path. But then a lot of people, it's almost the countercultural movement, is saying it's not going to be a big deal. Like, I'm sure people watching this video are going to be upset with you or me throughout the series when we say it could just be like the flu.
I mean, it doesn't seem to be. I'm not saying that. I just brought up the flu number because I feel like that should be a fair baseline where at 650,000 deaths per year, no one cares, no one does anything to stop the flu from happening.
So it's like just over 500,000 deaths per year every year is the flu.
So if we had...
And that's with a vaccination.
Yeah.
So it could be I don't know. There's like math you can do with the R naught values and stuff. It could be 1 million people if there was no vaccination for the flu.
Maybe. I'm just trying to put things in context, that's all. I obviously don't know what the heck's going on. But this is obviously going longer than I ever expected. I
We're
thought
at another
the first
hour.
one would be an hour, and then like, we'll tone it down after this. But the last thing that I want to touch on here is, again, this helicopter money idea that just...
Where did this meme come from? Because I saw people doing this a week ago, and I didn't even catch it.
So I think some economist used the term helicopter money as almost a joke a long time ago, as like, this is a horrible idea. You can't just give people money because that devalues money, you know? But now it has become that's what that means. Like when you just give everyone money, it's helicopter money now. Trump, I don't know if you saw the tweet that he tweeted and then deleted.
No.
Where he said, soon we will be sending each person a check, but I'm going through, and anyone who used the hashtag #NotMyPresident hashtag will not be receiving the check because I don't want to offend you. You know, it was obviously a joke.
Yeah.
But he deleted it.
Which probably brought more attention to it.
Yeah, I'm sure. So people are, you know, either chuckling at that or outraged over that. I think it's just a joke, but whatever. But Cuomo in New York, he just unleashes it. Did you watch this press conference with him? He just has this list of everything that's free for like the next 90 days. It's like you don't have to pay your mortgage anymore. He's working with the bank, so you don't have to pay your mortgage. You don't have to pay your credit card bill. There's going to be no overdraft fees or ATM fees, and like I don't remember the full list.
Offering 90-day relief on mortgage payments, waiving mortgage payments based on financial hardship, meaning if you are not working, if you're working only part-time, we're going to have the banks and financial institutions waive mortgage payments for 90 days. That will be a real-life economic benefit. It will also be a stress reliever for many families. Waiving these payments will not have a negative effect on your credit report. There'll be a grace period for loan modification. We're not exempting people from the mortgage payments. We're just adjusting the mortgage to include those payments on the back end. No late fees or online payment fees. Postponing or suspending any foreclosures during this period of time. And waiving fees for overdrafts, ATM, credit cards.
But I just don't understand how we're paying for this.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know what's just delayed. Like when you say you don't have to pay your credit card bill, that just means like maybe the interest is now zero for 90 days.
I think
But
so.
at the end of 90 days, you will have to pay for whatever you bought. I would hope to God that that's what that means.
Right.
Like that doesn't make any sense that you just don't have to pay your mortgage.
I don't understand if we're going to do these helicopter payments or whatever. Like I understand desperate times call for desperate measures, but it seems like it should be some sort of loan to keep people somewhat responsible with this money. If people get $2,000 and then go out and start buying video games and alcohol, how is that good for anybody? Maybe that would be good for the economy. Maybe it just injects money into the economy, and maybe dumb people spend 100% of their money, and so maybe it just kind of trickles down to everybody else. I don't know. But you hear people like Peter Schiff saying, this is the end of the dollar. Like, this is what I've been telling you is going to happen. And everybody mocked Peter for years. Like, no, we're not doing this. Like, the United States will never stoop to this. And now Trump, who claims to be the most conservative guy, like, you know, there's debate if he is or not, but he's just all for it and everybody's behind him. All of a sudden now, yep, everybody just gets free money as much as you want for as long as you need. And we're all going to be fine, and then the economy's just going to bounce back immediately after this. I don't see how that's possible.
Well, in my conspiracy video about the virus, they get to this at the end where they're like, what they are proposing, what this guy is saying could happen, is that they're going to say, you know what, we need to get rid of all cash. Like physical money is able to spread the virus, and we need to get rid of that. Yeah. And they will go to some kind of blockchain sort of thing to where, you know, you don't need cash anymore. But now the government could have more control over your money. They could say, you know what, we're not going to let you just... Right now, if you're panicking, like you could just pull out all your cash and literally put it in your mattress like they did in the Great Depression.
Yeah.
And the government has no control over that whatsoever. You could hoard physical gold, and the government has no control over that. But the second that your money now sits in a bank account, and it's not really money, it's just like a number,
Yeah.
or even more so, you go the Bitcoin route, you know, like if there's a blockchain for a government, it's now the government can really control like what that does digitally, you know. And it was just an interesting idea that they paralleled it with the Patriot Act, and they said, you know, we had 9/11, and what did the government do? They implemented this new act that's going to put all of this surveillance with TSA and with Homeland Security, and it's just a freedom that we have learned to live without. And younger people probably don't even know what that freedom was like, to just walk with your family to the plane and like wave them off, you know?
Yeah, right.
Like that doesn't exist anymore. And they were proposing that this could be the next step, is that we get rid of money and we disguise it as, you know what, that virus spread through money. We need to get rid of that. I'm all for getting rid of the change. Let's get rid of the pennies and the quarters. Then we don't need that anymore.
Yeah.
But like dollar bills, I mean, I know it's a pain in the butt, and it's a way, you know, everyone talks about, we'll probably talk about this later throughout this process, Bitcoin. But everyone talks about how like Bitcoin is used for all these illegal activities, but like cash is the #1 way to deal with illegal activities. And so anyway, you can watch that video. It's at the end. They get into the economic implications of the virus, and one of them is there's a good chance that we will get rid of cash, and it'll be disguised as, you know, like maybe Trump starts giving out, or the next president, whoever that is, starts giving out like these $1,000 payments in some other form or something, because dollars now are spreading the virus.
On that delightful note,
I got to edit this video?
I edited the one yesterday. You got to edit this video, and we should learn to tone this down. If we can make like 20-minute videos.
I would like to know in the comments, since we just started this, if people like our random ranting and like free-flowing form, or if they want it more structured, or if they want it shorter. I know a lot of our audience is photographers, and I'm seeing a lot of people saying, oh, I'm just editing pictures while I listen to you goons talk about whatever you're talking about. And I know a lot of people, I'm also really thankful, a lot of people have said that they appreciate hearing our perspective, because we are kind of like the average person. We're not financial people, and we're not epidemiologists. Like,
we're pretty dumb.
We're pretty dumb, and we just bring like kind of the layman's perspective in it. But like you said, the purpose of this isn't to like necessarily inform others as much as it is as a personal diary to reflect on years from now.
Yeah.
Because all of these thoughts that we have are like true thoughts. You know, it's not like we have some agenda and we're trying to spread fear or anything. Like, there's days like today, I feel like I wasn't very fearful. I feel like I'm pretty calm.
It's becoming your new normal.
Maybe, and maybe that's what we'll find. Is like in next week, maybe we're calm, and then we see everyone else doing these same vlogs, and they're like freaking out in New York City.
Yeah.
I don't know. It'll be interesting. So I encourage other people to start doing this process too. I think it'd be really cool to reflect back and see what other people's experiences are. I would love to see what Asia's doing, you know.
I wish there was more information coming out. Like
China, man, like that's what happens when you have a dictatorship government that's
I know,
controlling
but you
the
know,
media.
South Korea is not supposed to be like that. But
It's probably there. It's just the filters and algorithms, Big Brother, YouTube, they filter everything out to where, like, unless you find that and seek it and watch a couple South Korean videos, you're just never going to come across it. Maybe we should look for a few. I do want to know what's happening in
we
Singapore.
need to catch coronavirus, recover, and then fly to South Korea and then film for everybody back
Dude,
home. Like, what the heck is going on?
If I could go live in Singapore right now,
I mean, Singapore would be sweet.
Singapore's awesome.
Yeah.
But, all right, let's get out of here. It's time to eat. I got to